Introduction to Surah 51, Adariyat, from the Yusuf Ali Quran translation. So the winds that scatter. This is an early Meccan surah, the second of the 7 Suwar, forming a group dealing with revelation in the hereafter. See the introduction to Surah 50. This surah deals with the varying ways in which truth prevails beyond resistance, even against all human efforts. The summary of 1 through 23, the winds may blow and scatter, lift and rush, or divide in all directions, but the truth and promise of God are sure and stable, wherever you may see signs both around and within you. 24 through 60, past events and what you see before you point to the unfailing consequences of all you do. Allah of His grace sends you a reminder. The loss is your own if you reject and deny. And after the winds that scatter, we arrive at the introduction. A very interesting thing in the winds that scatter, you have the purpose of life, why, and a response in the verse, وَمَّا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونِ. And then the verse, وَمَّا أُرِيدُ مِنْهُم مِّن رِزْقٍ وَمَّا أُرِيدُ أَن يُطْعِمُونِ. And then finally the verse, إِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الرَّزَّاقُ ذُو الْقُوَّةِ الْمَتِينُ. So then we're arriving at the introduction to Surah 52, Al-Tur, the Mount. This is the third of a group of 7 Meccan Suwar described in the introduction to Surah 50. It is like its predecessor, an early Meccan surah. The points emphasized here are that revelation is in accord with all God's signs, including previous revelations, and that the hereafter is inevitable, and we must prepare for it. The summary of 1 through 49, all signs of God, including previous revelations, point to the inevitable consequences of ill deeds and good deeds. How can people deny or ignore the message of revelation? And then we, after the mountain, we arrive at the introduction to Surah 53, Al-Najm, the star. This is an early Meccan surah. It is the 4th of the series of 7, which were described in the introduction to 50. The particular theme of this surah is that revelation is not an illusion. The illusion is in the minds of those who doubt and have false ideas of God. God is the source and goal of all things. In some suwar, the consecutive arrangement shows or suggested, it is shown or suggested by a keyword. Here the keyword is star, corresponding to stars in the last verse of the last surah. So in 46:1, the words exalted in power, full of wisdom, are carried forward from the last verse of Surah 45. And indeed, the same words occur in the last verse of Surah 45. So again, the words most merciful, forgiving in 34:2 refer back to the words forgiving, most merciful in the last line of Surah 33. So in Surah 54:1, the nearest of judgment recalls the same idea at the end of the previous surah, 53:57. Other examples will also be found. Summary of 1 through 32. The impression received by the prophet in revelation is neither error on his part, nor deception by others, nor does he speak from selfish motives, and it comes clearly from Allah, who is not what the vain imaginations of men conceive. He is all in all, first and last, Lord of all, ample in forgiveness. Those who turn away are petty and ignorant, not knowing that Allah is the source and goal of all things, and men and nature, and of the events of history. Therefore serve ye him. So those who turn, serve ye him, regarding 33 to 62. And the whole of the surah refutes the idea of the satanic verses, idea that Muhammad uttered these words. The language doesn't match the surah. So it was never considered part of the chapter. The idea that people went back and edited it later. The meaning doesn't fit in on both sides of where they think it was inserted, but we arrive at the introduction to Surah 54, Al-Qamar. This is an early Meccan surah, the fifth in the series of dealing with judgment, and the truth of revelation is explained in the introduction to Surah 50. The theme of the surah is explained by the refrain, "Is there any that will receive admonition?" which occurs 6 times at the end of each reference to a past story of sin and rejection of warnings, and the appeal to the simplicity of the Quran, verses 15, 17, 22, 32, 40, and 51. There is an invitation to listen to the message and turn to truth and righteousness. The summary of 1 through 55. The hour of judgment is nigh, but humanity forgets or rejects the message, as did the people of Noah and Ad, and of Thamud and Lot and Pharaoh. Is there any that will receive admonition? So the oft repeated verse here, this we get 6 times, is, well, in different context. Think of the whole Rig Veda, Sam Veda sort of argument that once you are exposed to it enough, you kind of get it. Wala kantarakna ayadan vahal memadakir. Oh, Mudakir, okay. So it looks like that's the, oh wait, no. 17 is a little different. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُّدَكِّرٍ. Okay. I'm glad I saw that, because then I could correct myself. So we arrive. So that chapter was called The Moon, and the most gracious introduction to Surah 55, Ar-Rahman. The majority of commentators consider this an early Meccan surah, although some consider it a lesser part as dating from Medina. The greater part of it is undoubtedly early Meccan. It is highly poetical and most sublime, and the refrain, "That which the favors of your Lord will deny," is had 31 times among its 78 verses, with 47 verses that don't have that. And of course, you notice a certain effect with it. And context of meaning. It's not like every other verse. There's, it is the 6th of the series of 7 dealing with revelation. the favors of Allah and the hereafter. Here is the special theme indicated by the refrain, the rhyme that, in most cases, is the dual grammatical form, and the argument implies that those things are created in pairs. There is an underlying unity through the Creator in the favors which He bestows and in the goal to which they are marching. Summary of 1 through 34. Allah most gracious has sent revelation, one of His greatest favors to humanity. His creation is in pairs well balanced. All created things receive His favors, but they will all pass away, and only God will endure through all ages. 35 to 78. Ultimately, all evil shall return to its destination, as well as all good, but ever blessed is the name of God, Lord of glory, honor, and bounty. And then we turn to the introduction to Surah 36, Al-Waqi'ah, the inevitable. This is the seventh and last surah of the series devoted to revelation and the hereafter, as explained in the introduction to Surah 50. It belongs to the early Meccan period, with a possible exception of 1 or 2 verses. The theme is the certainty of the Day of Judgment and its adjustment of true values. 56, 1 through 56. Allah's power, goodness and glory. 57 through 74. Those verses. And the truth of revelation. 75 to 96. A summary of 1 through 56. When the Day of Judgment comes, the world, obviously we know it, will be shaken to its foundations, and men shall be sorted out into 3 sorts: those nearest to God in exalted bliss, the companions of the right hand in bliss, and the companions of the left hand in misery. 57 through 96. Surely the power and goodness of God, of which revelation is a sign, should lead humanity to accept the message and to glorify Him. And then we turn to the introduction to Surah 57, Al-Hadid, the iron. We have now studied the contents of nearly 9/10 of the Quran. We have found that the arrangement of the Suwar in the present text is not haphazard, but that they follow a distinct logical order, more helpful for study than the chronological order. The comprehensive scheme of building up the new Ummah or brotherhood and its spiritual implication is now complete. The remaining 10th of the Quran may be roughly considered in 2 parts. The first contains 10 Suwar, 57 to 66, all revealed in Medina, and each dealing with some special point which needs emphasis in the social life of the community. The second, 67 to 94, contains short Meccan lyrics, each dealing with some aspect of spiritual life expressed in language of great mystic beauty. The present Medina Surah is chiefly concerned with spiritual humility and the avoidance of arrogance, and a warning that retirement from the world may not be the best way of seeking the good pleasure of God. It is probably after the conquest of Mecca in the 8th year Al-Hijrah. The summary of 1 through 29. Allah's power and knowledge extend to all things. Follow His light direct, without doubt or fear or half-heartedness, but with humility, generous charity, and faith, and not in a life of isolation from the world. And the introduction to Surah 58. Al-Mujadila, the woman who pleads. This is the second of the 10 Medina Suwar referred to in the introduction to the last surah. Its subject matter is the acceptance of a woman's plea on behalf of herself and her children. See verse 1. And a condemnation of all secret councils and intrigues in the Muslim Brotherhood. Not the modern group, by the way. The date is somewhat close to that of Surah 33, say between 5 and 7 Al-Hijrah. In summary of 1 through 22. All false pretenses, especially those that degrade a woman's position, are condemned, as well as secret consultations between men and intrigues with falsehood, mischief, and sedition. And then we come to the introduction to Surah 59. Al-Hashr, the mustering. This is the third of the series of 10 short Medina Suwar, dealing with each with a special point in the life of the Ummah. See the introduction of 57. The special theme here is how treachery to the community on the part of its enemies recoils on the enemies themselves, while it strengthens the bond between the different sections of the community itself. And this is illustrated by the story of the expulsion of the Jewish tribe of Banu al-Nadir in Rabi al-Awwal, 4 Al-Hijrah. This fixed the date to the end of the surah. Summary of 1 through 24. The expulsion of the treacherous Jews. It's not talking about all Jews, just some particular ones who made some certain mistakes there, from the neighborhood of Medina, was smoothly accomplished. Their reliance on the fortified positions and on the faith of their allies in treachery proved futile. But the internal bonds in the Ummah were strengthened. Such is the wisdom of Allah, or the most beautiful names. And we find that when the Muslimin gained control over lands, Jews that were expelled by groups like the Christians were allowed to return. So that kind of disproves what some people might necessarily think. Oh, they kicked out the Jews there. Well, they didn't kick them out because they were Jews. Surah 60, Al-Mumtahina. So that which is examined, and it has, I'm not going to read it out here, I guess, but it has a pretty good verse for, a marriage ceremony, I guess, 6:12. But this is the fourth of the 10 Medina Suwar, each dealing with a special point in the life of the community. Here is the point is, what social relations are possible with the unbelievers. A distinction is made between those who persecute you for your faith and want to destroy you and your faith, and those who have shown no such rancor. For the latter, there is hope of mercy and forgiveness. The question of women and cross marriages is equitably dealt with. The date is after the polytheists had broken the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, for which we see the introduction to Surah 47, so about the 8th of Al-Hijrah, not long before the conquest of Mecca. The summary of 1 through 13. The enemies of your faith who would exterminate you and your faith are not fit objects for your love. Follow Abraham's example. But with those unbelievers who show no rancor, you should deal with kindness and justice. Marriages between believers and unbelievers. And so the Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.